Hey guys, and welcome back. So it's Saturday evening for me, probably a week before you see this, right? And I'm sitting out here on the porch with a cup of tea, enjoying what I realize is probably one of the last really nice warm summer evenings, right? Before Missouri decides to give summer over, right? And we're going to sit here and talk about mushrooms because I know it'll be September before we know it, and well, fall's not too far behind, right? So, mushrooms are one of those foods that you either love or hate, right? For some people, they'll eat them on their pizza all day long, and some people, they will pick them off like you personally just offended them by putting mushrooms anywhere near them. I don't understand why mushrooms are so controversial, right? People will eat pineapple on pizza, and somehow the mushroom is where people draw lines. Okay, so I will eat mushrooms on my pizza. You better keep the pineapple away. So, love them or hate them, we need to talk about them because we're moving into medicinal mushrooms as a part of the immune system series. And there's some really fascinating things that happen here, right? And we're starting with one of the most famous of the lot, Reishi. And that's kind of cool to me. I do find mushrooms quite fascinating. But before we go any further, though, I want to point out something, right? For this entire series, we've been talking about plants, right? Elderberry, elderflower, astragalus, echinacea, right? But we're leaving the plant kingdom right now because mushrooms aren't plants. They're fungi. And so fungi have their own kingdom. They're not part of the plant kingdom. So mushrooms don't photosynthesize like plants do. They obtain their nutrients by breaking down organic material around them. And underneath the mushroom you see growing above the ground or growing on a log is often this incredible network of thread-like structures called mycelium. Mycelium, I think that's how you pronounce that. And you think of mycelium almost like an underground or sometimes inside the wood network. The mushroom itself is the fruiting body, right? And that's the part most of us recognize. So when we're talking about medicinal mushrooms, we're entering a completely different branch of natural sciences. And that's kind of cool, right? And that's how they fit into the herbal series. So, reishi is a Japanese-derived common name most people in the U.S. recognize. You'll probably also hear Lingzhi, I think that's how it is, particularly in Chinese context. And you'll encounter different Ganoderma species outside of it, right? And the Ganoderma fruiting bodies, right? So you'll understand why I said that they'll look like a varnishing mushroom, right? They're shiny, they're reddish brown, they can almost look fake. Like somebody made a little decorative mushroom for Hobby Lobby and then left it attached to a tree somehow. But they are real, and reishi and its related Ganoderma mushrooms have a very long history in East Asian traditions, right? So here's where the marketing department apparently got involved a couple thousand years ago. Reishi has sometimes been called things like the mushroom of immortality, which is a lot of pressure to put on a mushroom. It really is. I mean, they're little mushrooms. So let's manage our expectations a little bit, right? I don't care how much reishi tea you drink, you are not going to become immortal. That's not how immortality works. But names like that do tell us something important. They tell us how highly regarded these fungi became in their traditional cultures, right? So reishi has a long history in Chinese traditions where it became associated with longevity, vitality, and well-being. That historical reputation is fascinating within itself. But traditional reputations and modern clinical evidence aren't automatically the same things, right? So you respect the history without turning the mushroom into this magical superhero. I mean, maybe that's why he was in Mario Brothers was a little mushroom. I don't know. But mushroom is actually my favorite in Mario Brothers too. But this is where today's lesson connects beautifully with the echinacea video, right? So remember when I said I don't particularly love the phrase boost your immune system, right? Reishi is the perfect example of why, right? Your immune system isn't a weak muscle that you simply need to make stronger, right? Sometimes you want more activity of your immune system. Sometimes you want less activity. Sometimes you want a different response than what you're getting. The goal isn't more immune system. It's not how it works. The goal is appropriate immune function. And that's why you'll often hear a word associated with medicinal mushrooms called immunomodulation. Say that one about 4 times too fast. So don't let that word scare you, right? Modulate essentially means to modify or to regulate something. Researchers are interested in how compounds found in medicinal mushrooms interact with immune cells and immune signaling, right? That's much more nuanced than saying mushrooms boost your immune system. So you gotta love those marketers. I mean, they really know how to push it, don't they? So 2 groups of compounds you'll hear about frequently are the polysaccharides, including beta-glucans, and triterpenoids, sometimes called triterpenes. And now we're turning this into an organic chemistry lesson, but please don't take notes. Nobody needs that on a Saturday night. We're all a little brain fatigued. But these groups matter because they're part of the reason extraction becomes so interesting, right? So some mushroom constituents are more readily extracted in hot water. Others are better extracted with alcohol. And suddenly our preparation method matters again, even though they're both fungi, right? So all of this is kind of familiar. So we're like leaving the plant kingdom, but our preparations are still the same. So if you ever get your hands on an actual piece of dried reishi, you're going to understand something immediately. It is not chamomile, under no circumstances. Reishi fruiting bodies can be extremely tough, almost woody-like, dense, right? You don't sprinkle a little reishi in a tea ball and steep it for 4 minutes and think, oh, that's a lovely tea. No, absolutely not. This thing came prepared to fight you for everything it's going to give you, right? Which is why traditional preparations commonly involved longer simmering. Again, sound familiar, right? We just talked about this with astragalus, right? Tough material needs time. So you make a decoction. You simmer sliced or broken reishi in water rather than simply pouring hot water over it. Let me warn you, reishi is bitter, very bitter. This is not one of those herbs that you're going to be like, oh, this is just, I'm going to add a little honey to this and it's just going to be barely noticeable. Oh, you're going to notice. You're really going to notice. So that mushroom has some opinions about itself and it lets you know, right? So this is where medicinal mushrooms get really interesting themselves, right? So remember those polysaccharides and beta-glucans, right? So hot water can be useful for extracting many polysaccharides, but the triterpenoids are a alcohol soluble. Hi, Fergus. So herbalism And mushroom extract manufacturers may use what's called dual extraction, right? So essentially, we're using both water and alcohol extraction methods to capture a broader range of constituents. So if you've been following these videos for a while, you'll already understand the logic, right? Different constituents, different solubilities, different solvents, same principle we've been using with the herbs, right? We're just going to apply it to our fungus friends now. Cheddar has joined us on the porch tonight, and Fergus is not happy about this. So now we're going to talk about something you're going to see all over mushroom supplements. Fruiting body versus mycelium. Now, remember, the fruiting body is the mushroom structure most people recognize, right? The mycelium is the network of fungal threads from which the fruiting body develops. Both are biologically important, right? But here's where shopping can get complicated. Some mushroom products are primarily made from fruiting bodies, okay? Others use mycelium grown on grain. And sometimes that final powdered product can contain significant amount of grain along with the fungal material. And that automatically doesn't mean the mycelium is bad, but it does mean read the label. What species are you getting? What part? Is it an extract? What is the extraction ratio? Does the company report the beta glucan or glucan content? Are they transparent about what you're actually buying? I think we've become very generalized in just trusting labels. Because mushroom powder written across the front of a package doesn't really tell you very much, does it? And so this is one of the reasons I spend so much time teaching the preparations, right? Instead of simply telling you, go buy some reishi tea, right? Because here's the thing. Once you understand the plant, or in this case, the fungus, you become a much smarter consumer, right? Even if you're never going to grow any of this and you want to just understand what you're purchasing, right? A pretty label doesn't impress you quite as much as anybody else in the store, right? The word superfood doesn't automatically get $20 out of your wallet. You start turning the package around. What is in here? What species? What fruiting body? Is there any mycelium in here? Is it powdered or is it extract? How was it extracted? What does the manufacturer actually tell me about this product? That's useful knowledge, right? Very useful knowledge, especially if you live in a place that you can't grow these things. You want to make sure that you're getting the most for your money, right? Now, here's what we have. Here's where we have to separate out three different things, right? Traditional use, laboratory research, and human clinical evidence. These are not interchangeable. They're fascinating, right? The laboratory and the preclinical research involving reishi compounds and immune signaling is really fascinating. There's also been human research, but that doesn't mean that every health claim you see online has been proven. You're not going to drink 1 cup of reishi tea and live forever. And I think medicinal mushrooms suffer from the same problem herbs do. Something interesting happens in a laboratory. The internet gets a hold of it, as it does all things, and suddenly mushrooms cure everything. As many mushrooms as I've eaten in my life, I should never get sick then. But no, that's not how the science behind this fungus works. We can be excited about research without getting ahead of it, right? Reishi has a very interesting chemistry. It has a remarkable traditional history. It deserves continued research. People didn't use it for centuries if something wasn't happening, but we're not going to make promises that we can't really support, right? So Now, back to the mushroom controversy. Cheddar. Some of you are watching this thinking, well, I love mushrooms. Give me all the mushrooms. And some of you are thinking, absolutely not. No fungus among us, right? Well, the good news is you don't necessarily have to eat sauteed mushrooms to explore medicinal mushroom preparations. So decoctions, extractions, powders, tinctures, right? Capsules, right? If you just want to swallow and forget, there are different options. Although I will tell you right now, if you don't like mushrooms because you think regular button mushrooms taste weird, reishi isn't exactly the mushroom that's going to win you back. It isn't a buttery mushroom onion goodness. It's bitter and it's woody. It's basically the mushroom that is a grumpy grandfather to everybody else. It doesn't care what you like. It's not there to impress you. But yeah, if you're like, ooh, I don't like mushrooms, but I'll try this one to see if it'll win me over, don't start with that one. So now we got to talk safety, because I've always got to be a buzzkill. So because medicinal mushrooms are still biologically active substances, reishi products can cause side effects in some people, including digestive upset, dry mouth, dizziness, or I don't know, allergic reactions. There are also concerns about interactions with medications, including medicines affecting blood clotting, blood pressure, blood sugar, and immune functions. And there have been uncommon reports of liver injury associated with some reishi products, although questions about the producer's preparations and individual circumstances can make that data hard to interpret. So if you have liver disease, a blood disorder, an autoimmune condition, or you're taking an immunosuppressant, preparing for surgery, pregnant, breastfeeding, or have another significant medical condition, don't just assume because it's a fungus and you eat button mushrooms all the time that you will be fine with this. Talk to your healthcare professionals. And please buy medicinal mushrooms from reputable sources to make sure you're actually getting reishi mushrooms and not sticks of wood. So identification matters. Processing matters. There's a lot of people out there that sell a lot of herbs that look a lot alike under the wrong labels. So that's why reputable herbal companies are the best. Now let's bring this back to the immune system, right? We started this series with a really important idea, right? Supporting immune health isn't about just waiting until you're sick, right? Elderberry showed us about seasonal preparedness. Elderflower showed us that one plant can cross multiple body systems. Astragalus showed us how herbal support can become part of everyday food. Echinacea showed us timing and preparation mattered. And now reishi gives us another piece. Immune support doesn't necessarily mean pushing the immune system harder. Sometimes the conversation is about regulation, communication, balance, and how different compounds interact with an incredibly complex immune network. And that's a much more interesting conversation than take this to boost your immune system. I really am not a buzzword girl. So, to finish this out, right? Honestly, maybe this is the perfect lesson for a quiet Saturday evening on the porch with crickets screaming louder than anything I've heard in my life. We're getting towards the end of summer. For those of us on this side of the world, the seasons are going to change. Cold and flu season will eventually roll around again. And that's exactly why I'm having this conversation now. Not because I'm afraid of getting sick. Not because I'm afraid you're going to get sick, but because preparedness gives us time to learn, to understand our options, and to build our pantry and to ask better questions. And as always, we're making intentional choices before we stand in our pharmacy aisle feeling terrible and buying whatever box has the biggest word immune written across the front of it. That's really what the entire series is about, right? Learning so we have options, right? So whether you're team mushrooms on everything, that's me. I will literally saute them and put them on top of the steak. I love some mushrooms. Or team get that fungus away from me. So Rivka is team get fungus away from me. I'm team hand me your mushrooms. I hope tonight gave you a new appreciation for them, because love them or hate them, the fungus is fascinating. And Reishi is only the beginning. Next, we're going to talk about turkey tail, right? That one's the one that screamed around all the time. And if Reishi helped us understand immune modulation, turkey tail is going to take us somewhere else entirely, because we're going to start connecting medicinal mushrooms with our immune system, and our gut. And remember what we've been saying, the body doesn't read textbooks either. Everything connects. Everything works together, right? That's holistically. So, until next time, guys, stay rooted, stay curious, and as always, keep growing in grace.